Doctors, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to DigiNeuro, a digital initiative of Health and Youth Therapeutics, a joint venture with Newlink Company Limited, Japan. Health and You has a vision to fulfill unmet medical needs by introducing innovative and differentiated products. The first was Amnuride, amitriptyline plus mecobalamin, for the first time in India for diabetic neuropathy and migraine. We have the only one made in Japan mecobalamin injection, Nurite injection, which gives you 100% mecobalamin. We launched first time in India a combination of amitriptyline and propranolol SR for migraine when one drug is not enough. Amnuride Beta 520 ER, Amnuride Beta 1040 ER. We also have the first pharmacological combination for neuropathic pain of two neuroanalgesics. Pregabalin is BID, but we have made it once a day by TXR technology to match the pharmacokinetic profile of amitriptyline, which is once a day. So both put together, your patients get 24 hours of pain relief. We have recently launched a new strength of clobazam, clobazam 2.5 milligram. Add clobaz 2.5, 5, and 10 to offer you flexibility and control in epilepsy, febrile seizures, in up titration, down titration, and in BID dosing. We are about to launch a vitamin therapy recommended by Ann for migraine, and many more to come with your support and with your suggestion. Today is part 2 of our webinar by Dr. Apurva Puranik sir, which will be concentrating on therapy and rehabilitation of aphasia. This session will be coordinated by a young and dynamic neurologist from Kolkata, Dr. Durjoy Lahiri. He is MD DM Neurology, and he is practicing in a prestigious Bangar Institute of Neurosciences, Kolkata. He has special interest in aphasia and communication disorders. I have great pleasure in handing over the session to Dr. Durjoy Lahiri and thank Dr. Apurva Puranik for giving us this opportunity to carry this webinar. Sir, thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Lahiri.
So, good afternoon to all of you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can.
Yes, fine. Aphasia therapy and rehabilitation. Given the frequency with which we encounter cases of aphasia in our clinical practice on a daily basis, the amount of discussion that is devoted to the therapy and rehabilitation aspect of aphasia is really meager. And on top of that, neurologists will rarely take interest in listening to the therapy and rehabilitation aspects because often they are attributed as roles for speech language pathologists. However, I'd like to introduce the topic by saying that the history of aphasia therapy and rehabilitation starts from the First World War, and if we can divide the history into two aspects, two sections, it will be after the Second World War and before the Second World War. Actually, what happened after the World War, so many young people who suffered traumatic brain injury, they started to recover, which was not there before that era. So many of the people getting recovery from traumatic brain injury actually prompted people to think of how to rehabilitate them, how to give them therapy. And therefrom started the journey of modern aphasia therapy as well as rehabilitation. Prior to that, there was also some therapy, but many of the patients of traumatic brain injury used to die because of lack of medical management or surgical management at that time. So the history actually traces back to First World War, and the sections can be divided based on the occurrence of the Second World War, so 1947 and after that. Anyways, that's all about history. So as far as I understand, I was reading the book by Roberta Chappe for last 3 to 4 days. That is a landmark book for aphasia interventions. And I found that there can be modalities like pharmacological interventions, non-pharmacological interventions. And I, as a student of aphasia as well as neurology, I'll be really interested to listen to a stalwart in aphasia, Dr. Puranik, about this topic of aphasia therapy as well as rehabilitation. So without any further ado, I hand over the session to Dr. Pauranik. Welcome, sir.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Is my screen visible? Hello?
It is visible, sir.
Yeah. So now
Yes,
we
sir,
start.
it is visible, sir.
Yeah. So the title is Therapy and Rehabilitation of Aphasia. And as Durjoy was just now referring to, the history of speech language therapy, before World War I, there was hardly anything. Between World War I and II, people used to give some advice about oromotor exercises, confrontation, naming, pointing, and repetition. After World War II, when many survivors, war veterans came home, the two schools gradually emerged in speech language therapy. One was the holistic school, and the other was based on impairment based approaches. And this dichotomy can be traced in history even 100 years prior to that. So now about 200-year-old history of holistic versus localizationist school. In holistic thinking, the neurologists and physiologists would say that the language function is represented in the brain as a whole. Aphasia is a unitary disorder and it requires an overall unitary approach in the therapy. Some of the examples in that school after the World War II are stimulation approach and behavioral approach by Schuell and Skinner. And this was the era which was dominated by behaviorist thinking based on operant conditioning, in which they argued that you give a lot of repetition and auditory stimuli, ask the patient to go on repeating, and they thought that by hammering you can improve the behavior of the person. They didn't go into the details of the linguistic background and psychological background and all that. Pragmatic approach is also a holistic approach which believes that in persons with severe aphasia, if you expose them to the environment and you teach them practical aspects of communication by any means, not only verbal but even non-verbal means, they can do slightly better. The neo-associationist school between Gashwin and Goodglass is also a type of holistic school. I won't be talking about it today, but I will be devoting some time later on life participation approach. And in a way, you can consider that it is a holistic approach for the rehabilitation of a person with aphasia. On the other hand, there are impairment-based approaches which say that language functions are distributed in certain parts of the brain. Of course, they are connected to each other. There are network theories, and these networks are not very discrete. They are overlapping with each other. So it is not totally localization. It is neither totally holistic. It is somewhere in between. And here comes the Luria with functional reorganization and a neurolinguistic approach. But I would be referring today only to the cognitive neuropsychological model based in the impairment theory. Whenever we attempt any theory, we try to ask, is there any theoretical background for the therapy? Basically, to summarize it in 3 sentences, the theoretical underpinning of speech language therapy is based on neuronal plasticity. We all know that the neurons may not mitosis too much. Of course, there are some neurons which can generate even in adult life, but that is rather minor. But the dendrites and axons and the networks and the synaptic density and the synaptic conductivity, all of these things can be altered as a part of regeneration or recovery, and that phenomena is called neuronal plasticity, and brain has a great potential. And that's how the recovery after stroke or traumatic brain injury occurs. In the reference of aphasia, the same principle of neuronal plasticity is carried on because of repetitive behavior. That means the practice, the speech language therapy practices which are prescribed to the persons with aphasia, they lead to repetitive neuronal firing in those circuits. And there is a Hebb's law, which says that neurons that fire together wire together. So the new circuits are strengthened. In the holistic school, you are stimulating the brain as a whole. In the impairment-based school, you are stimulating certain parts of it with certain specific functions instead of general functions. The therapy is a type of a contract. It's a two-way process. In fact, it is a multi-way process. What happens between the therapist and patient is rather difficult to define and describe. The aphasia therapy is not only explicit, whatever therapist is telling, do this, do that, that is the explicit part. But there is a lot of implicit part, the one which is not said in words so clearly. And certainly it's an interactive process. It is not a mechanical application that this is the prescription, do this, do this, do this. There is a lot of implicit things which are going into the therapy, in which the patient has to be an active participant. The therapist also should respond and react and model his behavior based on the patient's own responses. And the therapist and the patient are equal partner and they have equal responsibility. Maybe the therapist has slightly greater responsibility. So how the theories in speech therapy they develop? Either you can have a priori pre-existing hypothesis or thinking, and you start prescribing it, and then you start collecting data, and based on your observations you modify your theory. It can be confirmed, it can be rejected, or you begin with data alone. You say, this is our data and these are our observations, and because by this method the patient is improving, this should be the theory. So it could be either way. No method of treatment is better than the principles on which it is based. So people are saying that there should be some theory, some principle, and that is the contribution of cognitive neuropsychology. As I was yesterday talking about the box and arrow models in cognitive neuropsychology, that's a theory. If you have defined a particular model or a particular theory, then there is a reduction in the theoretically motivated choices open to the therapist. So you say, here is the lesion in this box, in this arrow, then your choices would be restricted to that. So that is the contribution of theory, because if you have clearly articulated hypothesis about the representation and processing of cognitive functions, then you would discard other strategies and you will focus only on those aspects of the model. How the functional neuroimaging is giving us the new ideas and also helping us in reconfirming the language function in health and disease, and also the changes in functional neuroimaging as a result of therapy. There is a voluminous literature, but I will just give one example. Neurofunctional links between language and action. On the left side, there is a somatotopic sensory motor activation in the pre and post central gyrus during simple repetitive movement of the tongue. So the patient was asked to move the tongue again and again, tongue movement, and the green areas were becoming activated. And then he was asked to move the index finger and the foot. So the red and blue areas were becoming activated. Now look at the right side diagram. Here the patient was not asked to move any body part. He was simply asked to read passively the verbs, the action words. Lick. Now lick is concerned with the tongue. Or pick. Pick is concerned with moving the arm. Or kick. Kick is concerned with moving the foot. And the same areas were activated which were actually activated in the during movement. So this somatotopic activation of motor system reflects that the language areas are so closely related to motor areas, and that is one of the reason or one of the hypotheses which is behind intensive language action therapy, in which you couple the verbal practices with the motor practices. Of course, so many things cannot be coupled in the motor and speech function, but many can be coupled. So this is how knowledge from the functional neuroimaging guides us. So that was all about the theoretical background of the speech therapy. So now we enumerate the avenues of management: biological cure, behavioral cure, and social cure. In biological cure, we have pharmacological, non-invasive brain stimulation, and maybe stem cell in future, we do not know. In behavioral cure, there will be many types of SLT, which we will be talking today. And then finally, the social cure, of which the life participation approach is the main one. Biological. There have been reports of improved speech function like naming after transcranial magnetic stimulation in a chronic aphasia who was stable and non-improving for many years. This is a type of biological treatment in which either a direct current is given to the skull, transcranial direct current stimulation, or transcranial magnetic stimulation. The two work on slightly different principle, and whether they create an anode on the side of stimulation or cathode on the side of stimulation, what type of polarity you are keeping, what is the strength of current, what is the strength of magnetic field, whether you are stimulating the right hemisphere or the left hemisphere. So there are a lot of permutation and combinations in material and methods when people are doing their study with these methods. This field is in infancy. It is in the research stage, though at clinical level or practical level, some institutes in the world are applying it, but still the level of evidence is at a lower level, the C level, not very high level, because large, good quality randomized control trials are still needed. How does it work? It works either by stimulating the perilesional speech areas on the left hemisphere, or it works by inhibiting the counterproductive overstimulation and overcompensation being attempted by the opposite right hemisphere. So these are the two principles by which these non-invasive brain stimulation techniques are working. I'm not showing you any publications about this aspect. This was a systematic review about the efficacy and safety of pharmacological treatment for post-stroke aphasia in 2018, and the current evidence suggests that the drugs like donepezil and memantine can improve the function in post-stroke aphasia. Donepezil has some effect on improving the ability of auditory comprehension, reading, repetition, and oral expression. Memantine has a significant effect on improving the ability of naming, spontaneous speech, and repetition. But other drugs like bromocriptine, galantamine, amphetamine, and levodopa, the results are inconclusive. So that was a systemic analysis from 15 studies and 578 total participants. Then I come to the conversational, many types of speech language therapies. About pharmacological aspect, I would say that by themselves, pharmacological interventions are not very robust, but there are some additional papers in which they have combined speech therapy alone and pharmacotherapy alone and combination. So speech therapy alone is working. Pharmacotherapy alone, not so well working. But speech language therapy in combination with pharmacotherapy, the results are still better. So that is the current consensus about the combination. One of the methods in speech language therapy is conversational coaching, which is a partner approach, which involves a family member or some other communication partner. The person with aphasia and communication partner, they work together. It is a responsibility of both the people to use this technique. Conversational coaching is a great tool for the people who want to support their loved ones with aphasia. So you need a really motivated and intelligent caregiver. And in this coaching, the speech language pathologist acts as a coach. He's a coach for both. He is a coach for the patient as well as communication partner. And communication partner training is the result. And there are many more methods of communication partner training. In this method, we encourage the person with aphasia to communicate in a variety of ways, whatever means they want. They can use drawing, gesturing, writing keywords, asking questions, summarizing what the person with aphasia has said. There are great details available in the literature how a communication partner can be trained. So that was one method of speech language therapy. The next one is semantic feature analysis. In this, the therapy technique focuses on the meaning-based properties of nouns. People with aphasia describe each feature of a word in a systematic way by answering a set of questions. It has been shown to generalize. That means when you are giving a therapy, you are choosing 10, 20 words or 50 words. But once the patient has improved his function on those target words, there is a generalization to other words and other phrases which were not part of the initial therapy. And this is considered crucial in all therapies, whether the results of therapy are generalizing and whether they are long lasting or not. These are the two criteria on which you assess the efficacy. Now look here at the features of semantic feature analysis. In the center, there is a target picture, target object, which you suppose there is a picture of an apple and the person is not able to say apple. Now, what do? You ask him, what is it? He is not able to say. You can say, you use it for what? Or what does it do? Or describe its properties? Or where is it found? Or it reminds you of what else, the word association. So we will go on asking other related semantic features, and that may probably, and finally, if the patient is not telling the word, you give the answer again. So repetitive practice of semantic feature also helps in the performance in naming. Then I come to the third type of speech language therapy. It is ILAT, Intensive Language Action Therapy, which is a card exchange game. And I will show you a video here which was done by Pinky as a part of her PhD work. All of them have been distributed cards. And one more fellow must be having. Do you have the card showing leaf, patti, and all of them are aphasic? All four are aphasic. So he is also having a card of leaf. So this is how the card exchange goes on. Another video.
So verbal होना नॉन वर्बल होने से कोई मतलब नहीं. नॉन वर्बल वाला इंसान सबसे पहले उठा.
Now this fellow is having a lot of problem in articulation and word production. And this fellow may be having problems with auditory comprehension. Ideally, we are not supposed to give much prompting.
अच्छा बिल्ली लड़का कुर्सी बिल्ली पास में है लड़के के ऐसा है क्या अच्छा पूछो इनसे ध्यान से देखो पूछो इनसे आप ध्यान से देखिए ध्यान से देखो पूछो इनसे
The one who is asking should be able to describe in detail. The one who is supposed to match should again ask leading questions.
क्या पूछ रहे हैं आप पूछिए आप हाँ लड़का हाँ लड़का के आगे बिल्ली के बारे में पूछ रहे हो आप अच्छा है क्या लड़के के आगे बिल्ली वाला है तो ध्यान देना पड़ेगा ना आपको ध्यान दिया करो ठीक है
And total there were 10 sessions, each session lasting around 2 hours, and in each session there were 5 rounds of more than 5 rounds of such card matching game, and there were 3 groups of 4 participants each, and there was a significant improvement from first session to 5th and from 5th to the 10th. And how the improvement was calculated? It was calculated by the mean reaction time and the speech error rates or the success rates. There were many challenges in this game. It's a group treatment. It requires significant amount of cooperation in terms of time, commitment on the part of all participants. The analysis of result requires an extensive effort and time. We have to determine manually. We hope a computerized version will be developed. Difficulties in finding heterogeneous population is a challenge. And the motivation of person with aphasia and significant other is also a great issue. So that was another type of language therapy. The evidence-based systematic review for constraint-induced language therapy was published by Leora Cherny in 2008, and they said that there is a preliminary evidence about making the treatment decision, which should be used in conjunction with the clinical expertise. Coming to the severe aphasia, we cannot localize the functional damage in a particular part of the box and arrow diagram. While the cognitive rehabilitation, which was based on that box and arrow diagram, was a bottom-up approach. But the pragmatics is more like immersion of the patient and with maximum help in terms of gestures and other communication aids. So that is the pragmatic approach. In case of severe aphasia, we use different themes and different scripts. We show them videos and replays. We teach them how to take the turn during the conversation. The therapist takes the role of speaker. The therapist takes the role of listener. So all these things are part of life participation, are part of pragmatic approach. Life participation approach is currently the most popular treatment and concept in the management of persons with aphasia. It is not really one approach. People say it is the approach. Anyone doing therapy which only addresses the language impairment in a narrow sense may be doing a disservice to their clients. LPAA is relatively easy. You should be able to change your mindset. How will you change your mindset in favor of LPAA? You will think of whole person, not only the narrow deficit. You will consider the environment of the person, the family, and the circumstances, and you will think of connecting the therapy task to the participation of the person in activities of daily life. So what is important for a person as an immediate goal, as a short-term goal, those are the approaches. So while impairment-based therapy is also important in its own way as an effective tool, but it is more important to combine the two methods, and while doing so, we take into consideration the education, the training of the partner, the degree of counseling, the environmental modifications. So in case of LPAA, it is the quality of life which is the ultimate goal as compared to the impairment-based treatment, because here the participation is the goal. And usually in this method, there is no plateau. The patient can keep on making progress even if the linguistic skills are not improving. Communication is more than just information transfer. It is a social action which requires not only language, but also opportunity, activities, context, a good communication partner, and the confidence to try. It is not a prescriptive approach. You don't say 1, 2, 3, 4, these are the 10 things to do. No, it is not a therapy method also at all. It should be activity-based goals and then choose which treatment methods would be helpful for that. And person with aphasia is not the only target of treatment. The other targets of treatment are family members and the environment of the patient from which he or she is coming. Think of occupation therapists. What do they do? For a person with a motor deficit and hemiplegia, they change the environment of the person, the room and the bathroom and the kitchen and the dining table. So is the case of changing the environment in life participant approach. I will show you a brief video of a music therapy. I have no personal experience, and some people in India, some speech language therapists are using music therapy, particularly the melodic intonation therapy, and it is a big area. There are good results. I hope the link from the YouTube opens up. Most of the videos and papers which I have read about music therapy, they are from the Western classical music and from the choir listening about the Christmas carols and all those things. I'm not aware of Indian literature. There may be some papers on music therapy from the Indian classical music and Indian film music. It's taking a bit longer time to load student. Maybe I will move to the next one. The right hemisphere contributes in music therapy because the tone, the melody, the pitch, and so many other aspects of language are represented in the right hemisphere, and they can be harnessed in the communication skills of a person with aphasia. We have seen some patients with very restricted speech output, restricted to the consonant vowel recurring utterance, like the famous case of Paul Broca, who used to say only ta, ta, ta. But that single consonant vowel recurring utterance can be intonated into various meanings, and those who are living with that person, they would be able to understand. So I'm sorry, these YouTube videos are not loading today. I will come to the. Now I come to the impairment-based therapies. And I have shown this diagram about the cognitive neuropsychological model yesterday. And in this, we do a detailed assessment, say something like PALPA, and we localize the lesion, not in anatomical terms, but in terms of this box and arrow diagram. So whether it is auditory analysis system or phonological input lexicon or phonological output lexicon and so on and so forth. And based on that, there are a large number of studies on naming, on sentence level, on auditory comprehension. I will not read these tables, but I will only say that pay attention to a column in this table in the middle known as functional damage. And for each patient, they are saying, where is the functional damage? Damaged access to lexical, semantic, phonological representation. So that is the localization of lesion, not in terms of Broca's area or Wernicke's area. And based on this, they decide the treatment. Look at this table showing the treatment studies at sentence level. Again, read the fourth column in the middle. Where is the functional damage? Impaired verb retrieval and impaired sentence production. And then based on that, they would have the treatment. So this was one example by Bastiansi. The location of lesion was in semantic system. And what treatment was advised? The treatment advised was spoken word picture matching, written word picture matching, along with discussion of distinctive features, that is semantic features, and then identification from with the help of semantic cues. So these are the types of treatment which were given if the lesion was localized into the semantic system via its auditory input. Similarly, there's another theory known as verb network strengthening treatment. This is mainly concentrating on verbs. This is an evidence-based treatment for anomia, which focuses for verb. For people with mild or moderate aphasia, including fluent aphasia, you choose a set of transitive verbs, verbs which take one object, like dog catches the ball. Now, catch is a verb, and what is the object? The ball. You have pen, paper, index card, whiteboard, or a mobile phone app for this. And we create 3 pairs of subjects and objects and 1 target verb. And now think of 3 people who can perform the action and 3 objects who can do that action. So verb is only catch, and there are 3 subjects and there are 3 objects, and the patient is asked to make the combinations The goal is very specific, and this was published as a part of Tactus therapy group. Another treatment in SLT is oral reading for language in aphasia, ORLA. It uses auditory, visual, and written cues to assist the person with aphasia in reading sentences aloud. So there are set of sentences which the person is reading, and if he is getting some difficulty, he is given cues, the cues from auditory, visual, and written modes, the oral reading for language. So these were many of some of the many methods. Of course, there are many more. There are senior SLTs in country who know much more and who can tell many more methods of SLT. But for the sake of time, I have chosen those one. Now I come to what is the evidence base. So in medicine side, on neurology, we say evidence-based medicine, but SLT people call it evidence-based practice. So this was a paper from Cochrane Review in 2016. Martin Brody, Speech Language Therapy for Aphasia Following Stroke, Cochrane Database of Systemic Review. They studied, pooled the data from 57 randomized controlled trials. The total number of participants in these 57 trials was 3,000, out of which 27 RCT comparisons were done, and they compared SLT versus no SLT, and their conclusion was that there is effectiveness of SLT for people with aphasia following a stroke in terms of improved functional communication, reading, writing, expressive language compared with no therapy. Of course, you will say, how can it be ethical to not to give therapy? The answer was because they have a long waiting list of more than 3 months. So for first 3 months, a group was given therapy, and when the number of the next group came, they were given the therapy. So deferred treatment was the way they controlled. There is some indication that the therapy at high intensity and high dose over a long period will be more beneficial. However, high intensity and high dose intervention may not be tolerated by one. And we experienced this in our study of a lot, but all our patients could cope up with a high intensity treatment. This is another systemic review. This was another paper in Lancet by Katrina from Germany, intensive language and speech therapy in patients with chronic aphasia after a stroke. It was a randomized, open label, blinded endpoint control in healthcare setting. There are 156 patients. Verbal communication was significantly improved. 3 weeks of intensive language therapy was given. It significantly enhanced the verbal communication in young as well as old. It was chronic aphasia. That means the patient had reached their plateau. Because in initial few months, you can say that was a natural recovery. But once you know it is no more natural recovery is occurring, and even then these interventions are working, they are considered as a good evidence. So it is a good evidence-based treatment. Meta-analysis of several single case studies can be done. So if there are a small number of subjects in each study, you can combine the raw data from single cases, and that can also give the results. People have been asking that can efficacy of aphasia therapy be addressed by RCTs? They say RCT is probably an inappropriate scientific technique in this context. After all, what are the conditions which justify the use of randomized controlled trial? The population should be homogeneous. Persons with aphasia are highly heterogeneous. The treatment given should be homogeneous. Whatever studies have been done, the treatments are highly heterogeneous. The assessment technique should be sensitive. Our assessment techniques and goals and end goals are rather crude. So that's why it is difficult to plan or design studies in aphasiology. But I have a paper from Rebecca Palmer, which is going to be published in the forthcoming supplement, a special supplement on aphasia of Annals of Indian Academy of Neurology, in which she says that following considerations should be included whenever you plan or design a clinical trial in aphasia: whether it is needed, what is the readiness, what is the choice of comparators, What are the randomization options, blinding or masking? How should you select the outcome measures? Whether you should have pragmatic approach or explanatory approach, and how do you measure the fidelity? So it's a big paper, and I just summarized it here. It would be worth reading. So people say that when you ask a question, is speech therapy in general effective for aphasia in general? No, that's a wrong question. The right question would be, which specific mode of speech therapy can be beneficial in which particular type of patient? Because till now people have been asking wrong question. About 10 years back, the consensus from the Cochrane and other sources was that SLT is probably not effective. That consensus has changed only recently because the investigators have started asking the right question. And there used to be no critical mass. Why? There was so little evidence because so little of speech therapy was done. The critical mass was not done. So I think I should move further because the time is now running out. So I will now come to the role of computers and new technology. The first role of computers is digitization of augmentative and assistive communication devices. What are augmentative and assistive communication devices? These are diaries or drawing sheet with some pictures. All caregivers of person with aphasia tell us, sir, it's a frustration to understand what my patient wants to say. And after a lot of struggling, ultimately we know this was the thing he was wanting. And then we advise them, carry this notebook, carry this diary with so many pictures. You can paste your own pictures. And then in that case, that diary or that chart would help to point out the thing. So these are communication boards, and now they can be made digital. So with the help of an iPad, you can create hundreds of categories, and in each category, 10s and 20s of diagrams. So these are all digital. These are non-digital ones which were made at our center by our artists. So by these graphic representations, the communication between a person with aphasia and his caregiver can be added. Computers are also helpful in speech therapy. They are helpful in any rehabilitation department without speech therapy. So they probably replace speech therapist. I know SLTs would not be very happy with this, but there are now studies which are showing that computers are probably as effective as an SLT. The computers will also be used by patients and caregivers at home, either through the website or through offline CDs or pen drives. And in the last 10 years, there is a large expanding collection of practice material. And the beauty is that it can be repeated many times at the pace of your own. So this is another paper by Rebecca Palmer, the Big Cactus Study, which has proven the efficacy of self-managed computerized speech and language therapy as a means of providing more therapy than patient could other have got through the usual care alone. This is a big paper which has been published only last year in 2019, the Big Cactus Study. It was, pay attention, it was self-managed computerized SLT. And these are the various screens. There are these avatars on the screen who show the lip movement, and a lot of things have shown. Again, I'm worried about the link in the YouTube. Let me try for constant therapy. Constant therapy has been developed by Swati Kiran, an alumnus from ASH from Mysore, and she is now in US, a very leading figure in aphasiology, and she has established a commercial company with the name of Constant Therapy. A Hindi version is being studied at ASH Mysore by Dr. S.P. Goswami. We hope that it would soon be available in Indian market and in other languages also. Constant therapy is a computerized method in which it is self-paced. Patients and caregivers can do it. Of course, the SLTs can pitch in, they can contribute, they can add on, but it is both ways. So I think I will not hang out on the videos which are not working today, particularly the ones which are supposed to come from the YouTube internet. teletherapy. Now, teletherapy is also related to the same thing. We have already alluded to it. It's a video conferencing between single or multiple patient on one hand and the therapist on the other hand. And the same type of screens are there, which are open on both the ends. And you can create many avatars of your liking. You can give them Indian look. And there can be dialogues between them. So many things. And here is a patient or a therapist who's sitting in front of the screen and talking to the people. Eva Park is a virtual reality application or a software in which people can immerse. It is a type of social interaction in virtual world. And there are many characters, many avatars on the screen, and the person with aphasia can talk to those characters and they will respond back. So they are like robots, intelligent robots on the screen, cartoon characters, but which are interactive. When we see a cartoon movie, it is not interactive. Now this cartoon is interactive. So wherever the person with aphasia will carry the cursor, there would be interaction. I'm sorry for the link. But remember Eva Park. Prognosis and outcome after this, there are reasons for therapeutic nihilism. Why there has been a negative mindset in the neurologist's mind and to some extent in SLT's mind also. Because till now different types of evidence and different methods were used. Not enough was done. Wrong questions were asked. And that's why, and a good compliance was not there. Those were the reasons for a rather negative picture. And not enough attention was paid to the factors which can affect the outcome. The language abnormalities are only one aspect. The type of therapy, the nature of interplay with the therapist, the intensity and duration of therapy, the mode of delivery of therapy, the motivation of person with aphasia, the additional neurological deficits, and non-linguistic cognitive abilities. Finally, we come to some social aspects. In the last 5 minutes or so, there is a great need for advocacy for aphasia because it is so neglected. What is advocacy? The act of pleading or arguing in favor of something. Something what? Like a cause or an idea or a policy. Better assessment and better therapy and better rehabilitation of persons with aphasia is a worthy cause. So many things can be done are worthy ideas. And so many things can be fought for, can be lobbied for with government or policy. So we need advocacy actions. And who will do the advocacy? Of course, the speech language therapists, of course, the neurologists, and of course, the other professionals, and of course, the patients and their caregivers. All of them are advocates. They should join hand. They should create self-help groups. And and the clinical psychologists and the linguists, all of them will do the successful advocacy. There have been great examples from areas other than aphasia. Do you remember about 20 years back how militant, proactive, and passionate was the advocacy for HIV/AIDS? Somebody would remember Ice Bucket Challenge, which including Barack Obama as president took. You put on an ice bucket over your ice bucket water just to increase the awareness about ALS, motor neuron disease. There are good awareness campaigns for breast cancer. Something similar is needed for aphasia. And why not by significant others? And to make you a good advocate, our Isha and IAN can run training programs how to make a person a better advocate. This was a data from some study about the number of newspaper stories in some 5 years or last 3 months on aphasia, Parkinson's disease. So how many news articles appeared or newspaper entries appeared, and aphasia figures very low as compared to Parkinsonism, multiple sclerosis, autism, muscular dystrophy. All of them get a lot of media coverage. Why not aphasia? And that is proportional to the grants given by funding agencies and foundations. Aphasia got 200,000. Parkinson's got 1,600,000, and so on and so forth. So If there is less awareness, this was a small paper from Kerala, but more importantly, this is a paper again which has been submitted by Professor Chris Coate from Exeter, UK, for the special supplement of aphasiology of Annals of Indian Academy of Neurology, which would be published in next 4 months. The implications of public awareness and knowledge of aphasia around the world. And this paper is a narrative review examining the level of awareness, and it is unfortunately very, very low. The awareness is internationally very low, and the awareness and knowledge is even lower, ranging from 1 to 66% for awareness and 5 to 17% of actual knowledge. What is the value of such type of a study? The value is the implications of these results are there for service provision, for research funding, and awareness raising programs. Rehabilitation is, of course, the therapy which we have been doing, but it is a holistic approach. It should include physical therapy for motor deficits, cognitive therapy for mental deficits, occupation therapy for personal care or grooming, household works, job training, either earlier job or a new modified job, training for leisure and hobbies, and social cure, that is life participation, and psychological support. This all includes rehabilitation. While planning for therapy and rehabilitation, the SLT and the person with aphasia and the caregivers should define SMART goals. The SMART acronym, S for specific, the goal should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. And the goals can be short-term and medium-term. They should be decided in a joint consultation between an SLT and a neurologist and a person with aphasia and a significant other, and the goals will be revised from time to time. Finally, it needs a team. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a team to help a person with aphasia. Speech language pathologists have often been complaining to me and to other neurologists that neurologists and internists or clinicians in general do not refer a person with aphasia to them. And the clinicians say, no, we do. The SLTs say, no, they do not refer person with aphasia well enough. What is this well enough? Why we clinicians fail to refer person with aphasia well enough? We may be careless, we are ignorant, we ourselves are not convinced, we ourselves are not motivated, we are very busy. There is no system in place in our country like NHS in UK where patient will automatically go for rehab. We clinicians have failed to build a team of SLP, PT, OT and all. The other reason why the clinicians fail to refer person with aphasia could be the feedback which they receive from patients. The SLP did not do well, how much time she devoted, how patient was satisfied, what were the methods employed, what was the sincerity. And then the third reason is patient says, I am not responding. The reason is it is too early expectation, there were unrealistic goals, there was lack of effort by the person with aphasia and significant others, or the disease was very, very severe. So these are the reasons, but we must make more and more effort to refer the patient. How can we do that? We should not only refer, but also counsel, encourage, persuade, goad, nudge, request, exhort, devote time, bargain, incentivize, follow up, repeat, recheck, appreciate, take note. Please resist the temptation of writing a so-called brain tonic. Please spend time in all these activities which have been listed here. There will be dual pressures to prescribe some medicine, maybe from the industry, maybe from the patients themselves. Sir, please write something. You have to resist these pressures. So physician herself should become a therapist to some extent. It is not difficult. It is interesting. It is fun. It is joy. I can vouch for myself. It is satisfying. It will help build rapport and bonding with the patient. And never forget a neglected cog in the wheel. The cog in the wheel are occupation therapist, physiotherapist, neuropsychologist, physician, neurologist, SLT. We forget the significant other, the caregiver of the person. They should be trained, they should be motivated. Pinky and myself published this paper on the diversity of burden, but I will not read through it. We also published another paper on supportive conversational strategies, which are used by persons with aphasia and their significant others. And there is a role for patient support groups. That means persons with aphasia in a given city should form self-help groups that will help them in a big way and that will help the improvement. I will quote the example of Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard is a small island near the coast of Massachusetts in United States of America. And not now, but till few decades back, there was high prevalence of congenital deafness in the population on Martha's Vineyard Island. It somehow happened that the immigrants from Europe had that disease and it increased in the population. The prevalence of congenital deafness was so high that the non-deaf people also learned sign language. So in a way, they created a deaf-friendly community. Can we create a aphasia-friendly community in our society? May not be as good as Martha's Vineyard, but we can create a small bubbles of patient support groups, which will be aphasia-friendly community. And we tried this, Madhya Pradesh Vachaghat Sangh, many other meetings have been done. We have to do a lot for awareness and counseling for the patient. A lot of literature is available in English from many countries. This is a big charity in UK known as Speakability, and they come out with large number of literature and pamphlets. We have created it in Indore, large number of publications. We have created quiz on aphasia in English version for the doctors and MDs, the Hindi version for patients and caregivers. There are many brochures. This is a book on home-based exercises for persons with aphasia as a part of speech therapy. At present, there are 100 exercises which can be carried by, but of course not 100. The SLT, this SLP will give the prescription which therapies are to be done. And I will end with this book by Diane Ackerman, 100 Names for Love. She is a writist, science writer, non-fiction writer, and her husband is a fiction writer. Her husband got the stroke, and she has written her story, how her husband improved from a severe aphasia. It's a rich, vivid, poignant, inspiring narrative of recovery from aphasia in her literati husband, Paul West. So I recommend this book. All of you should read it. What are the research directions currently? What is the future? The contemporary scene of research in aphasia includes new phenomena are being described at the level of clinical, behavioral observations and subjected to systematic study. Theoretical models of language are subjected to experimental testing at the level of information processing in cognitive neuropsychology. Final analysis of structural and metabolic functional changes are being carried out with the help of structural and functional neuroimaging. Principles of evidence-based medicine and evidence-based practice are being applied to the diagnosis, to classification, to outcome measures, to goal setting, the quality of time, and randomized control trial. So that is the contemporary scene of research in aphasiology. So the recapitulation or the summary or the conclusion is, there is no time window for recovery. The recovery can keep on occurring beyond 9 months, beyond 12 months. It keeps on going. However, it may become slower. Intervention can help in all stages, from very early stage to late and chronic stage. Biological cures so far have been elusive, but may give value addition to SLT. Social cure is most important. The pace, diversity, and innovativeness in research portends hope. Thank you very much. Yeah, Durjay, now we can, you unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Please unmute.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Doctor, we can hear you.
Yes, fine.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Pouranik, for this wonderful lecture. And I have not attended a lecture better than this on this topic. of aphasia therapy and rehabilitation, such lucid illustration of all the methodologies that are being used, as well as evidences being provided side by side. So we'll discuss some of the questions that have come forward in the last 1 hour or so regarding this particular topic. Before I go on to the questions which have been forwarded by the audience, I have a question from my side, a personal question. That suppose a patient who comes to us with aphasia following stroke, post-stroke aphasia, the relatives who are accompanying the patient will often ask the neurologist that what are the chances that this patient is going to recover or not. So in other words, I am going to ask you, what are the determinants of aphasia recovery following stroke? What would be the most important determinant?
Yeah, I should have added that. I missed it. One is the severity of neurological deficit from NIH stroke scale. That's one. Second is the severity of aphasia, either from aphasia quotient or from Boston Diagnostic Aphasia Grading. Number three is associated cognitive deficit, which can be a part of NIH, but you need to test cognition in slightly more detail beyond NIHSS. Fourth is comorbidities like hypertension, diabetes, and age also. Fifth is the a priori intellectual level of the person, the education, the type of job, the multilingualism, how many languages, that's another criteria. Then comes the environmental factors. So those were the host factors. And now we have environmental factors. The environmental factors are the family support, the significant others, their education, their motivation. And of course, when people ask how much time will it take and how much percentage he will improve, it is really difficult. So we should admit our ignorance. We should say that we really do not know, but we should always be optimistic. We say, from my experience, most of the patients improve, and this is the statement which I give for all stroke patients, that in about 6 months, about 50% recovery would occur. And that 50% means the person would become independent in activities of daily living. That's the general prognosis I give, unless the features are highly negative. Patient may improve even more than that, but that is the median line which I use, and same applies to aphasia from my personal experience. It is not based on any data. Of course, there are data on the recovery of aphasia.
So thank you for the answer. There's just one more thing. By the same token, I'd ask that one of our viewers have asked these questions, Dr. Ashwini Bhatt. He wants to know that how do we treat degenerative aphasias? Because these days we are finding language impairment so common in the degenerative diseases as well, including both primary progressive aphasias as well as Alzheimer's disease. So do we have any therapeutic measures for this particular form of aphasia?
The general principles would be same, but the final details would change on the clinical profile. So if it is a frontotemporal dementia behavioral variant, it would be mainly to manage the behavior while the language function is not much affected. Sometimes you may need some neuropsychopharmacological interventions in behavioral variant. In the semantic variant, naturally the semantic feature analysis and the therapies which are concerned with the word association task, you want to work on them. Semantic priming and semantic associations and those things have been used. For primary progressive non-fluent aphasia, it would be, they have a selectively better preserved comprehension. So you will take use of comprehension. One more thing in general, which I should have taken for post-stroke aphasia also and for this degenerative, is cross-modality transfer of practice. So if you are doing the practice in verbal modality, there might be improvement in written modality. But vice versa, I have often found more. You give a lot of practice on reading and writing, and I have found some improvement in the verbal functions. Similarly, cross-language improvement. You give therapy in one language, there would be a spilling over effect in the other language. So I have not much experience with the degenerative aphasias, and in general, their prognosis is not good. But in some cases, there is a slow degeneration and there are plateau periods in the degeneration of some degenerative dementias, and it is our duty, humanitarian and clinical duty, to improve their living quality of living as long as they are not more severely disabled.
Okay. So thank you for the answer once again. There is another question that has come from Dr. Vishal Saude from Nashik. He wants to know that if you have any different strategies for treating Wernicke's aphasia in comparison to other non-fluent aphasias, because Wernicke's aphasia will pose a particular challenge as the patient will not be able to comprehend the commands that are given to him, and he will start speaking in jargons that we often encounter in our clinical practice. So is there any different strategy? Is there any special strategy that
Yes. Wernicke's aphasia, particularly severe Wernicke's aphasia, are very difficult to treat because they have anosognosia. They are unaware of their aphasic deficit, while the non-fluent aphasics are aware. They are acutely conscious of their difficulty in speaking. The Wernicke's aphasia people, they are unaware, and when they start speaking in a fluent jargon, they do not know where to stop. You have to stop them again. So main thing is to stop them, to learn the habit of turn taking. They don't allow the turn taking to the other fellow. So you have to teach them a behavioral method of speaking in a small epos, and then let other people speak to them. Of course, the other principles would be same. I think live participation approach would be better for Wernicke's aphasia, while the music therapy and melodic intonation therapy would be better for non-fluent aphasias. Your comment?
Yes, as far as I have encountered cases of Wernicke's aphasia, they have been very difficult not only to communicate but also to treat, because the patients will really understand what I am trying to communicate. They will speak in their own jargon, and it becomes very difficult to make myself understood. So let alone therapy, giving therapy to them. So anyways,
You have to use just a minute. You have to use cross modality treatment. If the Wernicke's aphasia is not understanding your command verbal, you show him the pictures, you show him the gestures, you show him the written script. So use other modalities so that something goes in the brain if it is not going through the temporal cortex.
Absolutely.
Where it should go.
Yes, yes, that's it. And one more thing I'd like to add.
There is some interruption.
Know what I'm telling them, they're not understanding it, but somehow at the subconscious level, they can understand what is being told. So just like, it is analogous to the kind of thing that happens with face recognition. Conscious level of face recognition, subconscious level of face recognition. I guess there is something like that working for word recognition as well as sentence recognition as well. So maybe, yes. So maybe yes, absolutely. Yes, please, your comments.
In cognitive neurosciences, this conscious versus subconscious dichotomy is expressed by another set of words, explicit and implicit. Explicit, which is evident outside, and implicit, which is there inside but not coming outside. So these two terms are often used in neurosciences, and they are applicable to aphasiology also.
Absolutely.
So you should not underestimate the implicit knowledge of the person with aphasia. You should not estimate your perception of the patient only by what is explicit. The person is knowing much more than what is evident on the surface.
Absolutely. So another question that has come up, 2 or 3 times maybe in that list, that what is the role of pyracetam and citicoline in treating aphasia? Because we often come across prescriptions writing the medicine.
I reviewed many papers. The studies were very small number of patients. They were not published in high impact journals, and they cannot be considered as a good evidence. So at present we say probably there is no evidence about their efficacy. Of course, personally, all of us are using one or other molecule. That's a different thing. But as far as robust evidence is concerned, it is not there.
It is not adequate at present. Yes, fine, thank you. And there is one more question that has been put forward by Dr. Gautam Das from Kolkata. He wants to know what is the role of neuroplasticity in speech therapy.
Of course, in my second slide itself, in the beginning, I said the whole recovery after stroke or any brain injury is because of neuronal plasticity. And I explained this term at the synaptic level, at the dendritic level, at the circuit level, and all those things.
Okay.
And I refer to the head.
Okay, so related to speech therapy as well as rehabilitation, as far as I understand from the presentation. One more question, that is one of the very interesting topics, and the body of evidence is growing day by day about the role of bilingualism and multilingualism in aphasia recovery. So, would you recommend that learning more than one languages will actually help you recover from post-stroke aphasia faster, or maybe your severity will be lesser compared to those who are monolinguals?
Yes, there is a weak evidence, but it is statistically significant, which says that bilingual and multilingual subjects, they have a slightly better recovery in their speech and language function following a stroke or other brain injuries. One of the reasons is that these networks for the two languages are overlapping with each other, and they may be slightly non-overlapping. So if the lesion happened to damage the network for one language more and spared the network for the other language slightly, there would be some recovery. And as I was telling a few minutes back, there is a cross-language spillover of the knowledge from one language to another. And there is one more thing: those who are bilingual and multilingual, the right hemisphere makes a slightly greater contribution in multilinguals. So that's why the recovery is slightly better. There is a big paper on dementia by Suvarna on this subject from Nizam Institute, Hyderabad, in association with Thomas Bach. One of the most quoted paper in the last 3-4 years is that multilinguals has a slightly later onset of dementia, but that's in different context, not for aphasia.
Yes, the paper was actually published around 7 years back, 2013, in neurology. That bilingualism delays the age of onset of dementia. Yes, I have read that paper many a time. One of the most wonderful works so far. And later on, subsequently, some of the other papers have come up from Calvo et al. They have mentioned that more methodological stringent will be required. You need to be more methodologically stringent before drawing such conclusions. So, weighing the evidence on both sides at present, it cannot be really clarified that if learning more than one languages can delay the onset of dementia or can let you have a less severe post-stroke aphasia. Still, there is a weak evidence favoring bilingualism or multilingualism. Yes, I completely agree with that. So that's it. Thank you. I hope I have dealt with all the questions, relevant questions that have come up through the session. It was a wonderful hearing to you, sir. Thank you. I look forward to
being a really good help, and your input is appreciated.
Thank you, sir. Fine.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Health and You, I wish to thank Dr. Apurva Puranik sir for elucidating this wonderful topic of aphasia. Your deliberations about awareness of aphasia actually took me back down the memory lane when I was in Eisai Pharma, and we had a challenge of increasing awareness of dementia and Alzheimer's during those days. And really thankful to you, and such kind of thing is now required for aphasia. So you not only looked at the therapy and rehabilitation, but overall context and the requirement of aphasia as a subject that needs to be done by all concerned. So sir, thank you very much for this wonderful webinar split into 2 parts, and we had record attendance once again. We have now more than 700 doctors attending this webinar. So thank you so much for that. And we also thank Dr. Lahiri for wonderful coordination. You yourself is an emerging expert in aphasia. You have presented papers on this. So you moderated the subject extremely well with question and answers. I would also like to thank the audience who took out their time to attend this session, both yesterday and today. So thank you very much. I hope you must have found the deliberation interesting and enlightening. We also thank you for taking care of Indians during this COVID-19 crisis. We would like to now request you to support us, the Health and You, with Health and You products. And signing off on behalf of Health and You, stay safe, stay healthy. Signing off from Health and You, always together. Thank you so much, sir. for your support and encouragement. Thank you, Dr. Lahiri, for your coordination. And thank you, audience, for joining us. Thanks a lot.